This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
He was a small-town kid. He was a pretty good piano player, but a chance move to Nashville was the beginning of a Grammy Award-winning career. Nashville's songwriter and producer, Larry Butler, on this edition of Conversations. Welcome to Conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for joining us. We are certainly, it's our pleasure to welcome Larry Butler to our program today. If you've heard any songs out there from the Kenny Rogers and the B.J. Thomases of the world, chances are Larry Butler's somehow associated with
I'm in there somewhere.
Tell me how you got started in the music business.
Well, I started playing piano at a very early age. In fact, I started piano lessons when I was 4 years old. And I knew immediately that I really did enjoy playing. I played in talent contests when I was 5 and 6. And at 6 years old, I had my own radio show here in Pensacola, and it was pretty much music was my life.
Right.
I wound up in a band that played at the Sahara Club years ago. Used to have a very popular nightclub in Pensacola. And the reason I got into the band, their keyboard player was moving to Muscle Shoals. And that was Barry Beckett.
Okay.
So I took Beckett's place in this band, Jerry Woodard and the Esquires. Well, we played the Southern Circuit, and one of those cities is Nashville. First night, first performance, at the end of the first set, the server came over to me and said, "The gentleman over at the table wants to talk to you." I went over, it was Buddy Killen, owner of Tree Publishing Company. He said, "If you ever decide you want to come to Nashville, I'll help you." Mm-hmm. So I told the band I was going to leave. They wouldn't let me have my clothes. My clothes were locked up. They didn't give me the money I had coming. So I went to the club owner and I said, "I need to get to Nashville." Well, there was a guy in the club who was going to Louisville. He was going right through Nashville. Jeff, I know this sounds like a fairy tale, but it's true. He was going through Nashville. The club owner gave me $20. He said, "You pay for his gas. Uh-huh. When you get to Nashville, call me so I'll know you're there, and I'll send you more money." So the next day, I walked into Buddy Killen's office with the clothes I had on my back and $3.50 left out of that 20. I said, "Here I am."
And how old were you?
22.
22 years old.
Yeah.
So in the big city, so to speak.
Oh, yeah.
And where did it go from there?
He picked up the phone and started calling Chet Atkins and Owen Bradley and Jerry Kennedy at Mercury, and he said, "I got a young kid in town, really good, give him a chance." The second week I was there, I did 11 sessions.
Wow. So you started off as a session player?
Yeah, playing piano, yeah.
Okay. What launched you from being a session player into writing songs and into producing?
Well, I was hanging out at Tree every day, and I was hanging out with Bill Anderson and Dottie West and Joe Tex and, some of the greatest writers in the world. And every day they'd come in with new songs, and I'd play piano for them in the little studio. And one day I said, "Well, I can do this. I can write songs." Well, it's not as easy as you might think.
Right.
Some of those early songs were really bad. So I started paying more attention, and I started listening to the radio. I started listening to the songs that these people were writing. And I really realized what the deal is with country music, especially the simpler the better. And so Buddy Killen asked me if I could play guitar. I said, "I may know 3 chords." He said, "That's it. Your next song, write it with a guitar." Because with the piano, I was overwriting. They were too complicated. Every song I wrote sounded like MacArthur's Park, So I wrote a song the next night with a guitar. I went in the office the next day and I sat down and played it for him. And when I sang the chorus of the song, he said, "Hold it." And I said, "I knew you weren't going to like it." He said, "That's a hit country song." And the song was called "Just For You." It was been recorded 65 times and was the #1 record for Furlin Husky.
I'll be darned.
So that's how it happened. But I will tell you this. The very first session that I sat down to play piano on, there was a guy telling everybody what to do, the producer.
Okay.
I knew that's the job I wanted. To be able to take the things that you hear in your mind and make it happen in the studio and hear it coming through the speakers. It's the greatest thing in the world. That's my Disney World.
How long did it take you to move from that writing and session jobs over into producing your first record?
5 years. And I walked into a tree one day, and Curly Putman, who wrote Green Grass at Home.
Oh, yeah.
He Stopped Loving Her Today.
Oh, man.
I walked in the door, and Curly said, Kelso's looking for a producer over there at Capitol. I jumped up and ran out the door. I literally, Jeff, ran down the street, ran up the steps to his office, and I walked in. I couldn't even talk. I was so out of breath. I said, I want the job. I want the job. He said, Larry, I've already hired somebody. And I said, well, I don't know who you hired, but they're not going to do the job for you that I would have done. He called me at 7 o'clock the next morning. Get in here to my office. He said, I could not sleep last night. So I went to his, I swear you, went to his office. He said, I got the guy another gig. You've got the job as a producer.
And the first person you produced was?
Gene Shepard, #1 record, 7 Lonely Days.
Was
First one.
What was it like the first time you walked in and said, okay, now I've lobbied for this job. I have it. Now I've got to produce.
Well, I made all the mistakes that you're going to make, you know. I came up with a Butlerism that says a great producer is one who knows when not to produce. You know, just because you've got extra tracks doesn't mean you need 14 tambourines. You know, just because you got extra tracks doesn't mean a French horn would be nice, you know. Seriously, once you learn the golden rule, and that is listen to the song, let the song tell you what it wants. And that's the way I make music. The song is the most important part of the record. Kenny Rogers, when he sang Lucille, you could see what was going on. It was vivid. Of this guy coming in the bar talking to his wife. Yeah. I mean, it was just clear as it could be. They're words that paint pictures that eyes never see.
Right.
But your mind does. And the more vivid you can paint that picture, the clearer you can paint that picture, the better it's going to be.
Now, but I've seen instances where several artists will cut a particular song, and it's like one has the ability just to nail it, and the other one misses it. So, obviously, it's very important to be able to write those words, but I'm assuming just as important to be able to communicate those.
Absolutely. And I'll go one step further with that thought. Nobody ever sings the song like the person who gave birth to it. When you're sitting there at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're trying to find that last word that rhymes with orange, there's not one.
There's not one, that's right.
There really isn't. But when you finally do figure out the rhyme scheme of the song, every time you perform that song, you relive that moment. It's more emotional. I don't care how good or bad the songwriter may sing. They always sing it with more emotion than anybody else. Now, when you can find somebody like Roger Miller or Bill Anderson, find somebody that not only sings but writes the songs. You know, Roger Miller, man, good Lord. You know, everybody said he was crazy. You know, he was brilliant.
Right. He
was a brilliant writer. I'm not sure I would have written You Can't Roller Skate in the Buffalo Herd. I don't think I would have, but he did, you know.
And got away with it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But coming back to the artist who can communicate, I've heard folks say that probably Kenny Rogers is the best at being able to take a song and communicate that to the audience. You worked with him for years and years. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally. Kenny was such a joy to work with. And you know what scratch vocals are. When you go in the studio with the musicians and he's singing, the artist is singing, most times you don't use that vocal. The artist will come back a few days later and redo the vocal. Make sure every note's right. 85% of Kenny's vocals that you heard on the radio were the live vocals he did with the band. Right. He enjoyed working with he enjoyed singing with the band, and he would work with them. He'd see them into it, and it would make him more, you know, into it, so to speak. Right. One of them was The Gambler. I mean, that you talk about painting a picture.
Oh, yeah.
And he was known as a storyteller. Ruby Don't Take Your Love to Town, Reuben James, Lucy, Coward of the County.
Right.
When I ask you, what was the biggest selling record Kenny Rogers ever had? what would you say?
I think most people would say the gambler.
Gambler. Coward of the county.
Coward of the county.
Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
But I'll tell you why I think it happened that way. It was a time in our history we didn't really have a hero. And the character in that song was a hero.
Yeah.
That these guys picked on him all of his life, and finally he had enough. They messed with his girlfriend. He goes and finds them, locks the door. Ooh, that was great.
Well, and that's another great story song. Are people who write country music, are they better storytellers than those who write the pop songs and Broadway songs?
I think so. I think they are, and I tell you who else? It would be folk singers.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, and their stories have a lot of depth, you know, and a lot of meaning. Well, so do country songs.
Right.
And I'll be honest with you, I was not really a country enthusiast. When I went to Nashville, I was pretty much a rock and roller and whatever. I toured with Ronnie and the Daytonas and the Gentrys, and so I got into Nashville and I started working on all these sessions. And so after I'd been there about a month, I said, "When do we get our checks?" And they said, "They come through the union. You have to go to the musicians union and pick them up." Oh, so I went to the union. I said, I understand I get my checks here. "Oh, yes, sir, Larry, hang on a minute." And they set down a stack of checks on the counter. And I looked at them and I said, "Ooh, I love country music."
Are the people, are today's artists better, and I'm not talking about from a technology standpoint, I'm talking about from a talent standpoint, are they better today than those of yesteryear, or vice versa?
Well, that's a good question. And let me answer it by saying this. Keep in mind, the artists of yesterday did not have tuners. They were not electronically tuning their vocals as they're done today. They nailed it. I mean, if they sang flat, they sang flat. But when you go back and listen to Ronnie Millsap and Conway Twitty and Kenny and Dottie West, Dolly, man, they were singing. I mean, they were singing because they had to.
Right.
There was no such thing, as I said, as a tuner. This day and time, and I'm not going to sit here and say anything negative about what's going on in music. We got some great music going on. But if you don't nail it vocally, most times you can fix it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that bothers me.
Has the industry started looking more at the show side of it as opposed to the actual, talent side of it?
You did your homework, didn't you? Man, you got some good questions. It's vitally important that somebody be able to be a good showman. Everything's more expensive. Ticket sales, I mean, the cost of going to see a show is 10 times what it used to be. So consequently, when somebody goes out and spends $65 for a ticket to go see a country performer entertain, they want to be entertained. In the old days of a song or singer going out there with a guitar and say, "Wrote this song, goes kind of like this."
No more.
No more. They're going to have to do a show, perform. Now, there are the rare exceptions. And Conway was one of those. Conway Twitty would walk out on that stage and just sing hit after hit after hit. No dancing girls, no routines. He would just sing his hits. Well, he had 50 of them. Did you realize he had 50 number ones consecutively?
That's amazing.
Now, we all thought that would never be broken. George Strait broke it. He's had 56.
Well, he's another one that doesn't dance around.
No, he does not. Yeah. There are those rare exceptions. Now, Garth would jump all over that stage, and he'll swing from, whatever chords, lighting chords, whatever. And when he did that special years ago, and he grabbed a hold of that cable and swung across. Right. I was sitting there thinking, I bet his manager is real nervous right now.
His insurance company.
Right. So, I bet they were too.
Who have you worked with over the years who has it all? who has the ability to nail the song, communicate the song, the ability to entertain the audience?
Wow.
Who's the best?
Well, let me tell you something. I've had one of the most incredible careers of anybody I've ever seen, because I have worked with Sammy Davis Jr., Paul Anka, John Denver, Julie Andrews. I recorded Mary Poppins. And that's a story in itself. We went out to my home one evening. We were listening to songs that people had submitted for us. And we were sitting in the middle of the floor in my great room. I had a 350-acre ranch and a great, really a great place. So we're in the floor and we're listening to the cassettes. Yeah, I know, yeah. And I've always loved candles. I have candles everywhere.
Right.
Julie says, "Do you have a sharp knife?" And I'm thinking, oops, I've made her mad. She's going to stab me, whatever.
Right.
I said, "Sharp knife?" She said, "Yes." Yeah, so I got up, brought her this steak knife, whatever. She got up and started trimming all the wicks of the candles. They burn much better when they're trimmed. And I'm sitting there thinking, I got Mary Poppins trimming my wicks. Man. That is too cool.
Speaking of John Denver, now there's a guy who could write some songs.
Oh, yeah.
What was he like to work with?
He was a joy to work with. John was a very deep person. He didn't just look at a tree. He looked at the bark. He looked at the trunk. He looked at the limbs. I'm serious. He was probably had more depth than anybody other than Johnny Cash that I ever worked with. John was a joy to be around. He never took anything for granted. He was a gracious person, a kind person, and one heck of a talent. He wrote most of the songs that he did. Right. But when we got together, I told him, I said, "John, I've got a song that I truly believe would be good for you." And I played him "Some Days Are Diamonds."
Oh, yeah.
And he loved it.
And who wrote that?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I'll think of it in a minute. I can see his face, but I can't. But it's a song that I had done years before, and I knew someday would be the right person, and he was it.
Yeah, he nailed it. Tell me about Johnny Cash.
Well, that could be an entire show. Johnny Cash was one of the greatest men I've ever been around. He influenced my life forever. For instance, we were doing a movie in Israel that John was producing, and we were shooting at dawn. I was there to make notes of what music to use behind certain scenes. And we're standing there on the banks of the Jordan River. John's got the Bible in his hand. And as the sun starts coming up, there was a perfect aura around John's head and shoulders. It just lit up. And I just went, so did his sister. And I started crying. I was emotionally taken by it. So he said, hold it. And he came over, and he never called me LB or Larry. It was always Larry Butler. He said, "Larry Butler, you all right?" And he put his arm on my shoulder, and I just, tears were coming down. I said, "John, it just dawned on me what we're doing here." And I said, "I really am proud to be a part of this." And he said, he looked around at the Jordan River and looked back at me, "Would you like to be baptized in the Jordan River?" And we had a pastor there with us who was the expert, make sure we didn't say anything that really didn't happen.
Right.
Well, next morning at dawn, I was baptized in the Jordan River. And something I'll never forget.
Johnny Cash sort of reinvented himself at the end of his life. He worked with the famous Rick Rubin, who's a famous music producer. What'd you think of that?
It was a direction he wanted to go. And he was fussing and mad and whatever, and he just did it, But again, I will tell you that the man had more depth than any person I've ever been around. And some of the things that he would do were just amazing. You got time for a quick story?
You bet.
I went downtown Nashville one day in my old Eldorado. I had a used Eldorado. I wasn't sure how long it was going to be running. And I remembered they had just torn down the Andrew Jackson Hotel. So I went by there and grabbed a brick from the Andrew Jackson and put it in my floorboard. That afternoon, I got a call from my mother here in Pensacola. She needed to go to New Orleans for ear surgery. She couldn't fly. Had to go by car. And I'm it. So I went into John's office and I said, John, I've got to go get my mother and take her for surgery. And I said, my only concern is my car. And he said, well, here. He had just bought a brand new Fleetwood the Elegance. I mean, just gorgeous car. Black, you know. I said, you're kidding. He said, no, here, you need any money? What? So anyway, I walk out with his keys. I gave him my keys. I come here, take mother to New Orleans, bring her back. Everything's fine. Go back up to Nashville, get his car cleaned up. And I pull into the office, and there's my old Eldorado, clean as looking great. So I walked in, and I said, John, thank you so much. And I hugged his neck and gave him his keys. He gave me mine. I got downstairs, got in my car. I got about a half a block. I looked around for the brick. It was gone. So I turned around. I went back, walked in his office. I said, John, did you see a brick in my car? He said, Larry Butler, I wondered why you felt the need to carry a brick in your car. I said, no, it wasn't that. I said, the Andrew Jackson, there was a brick from the Andrew, blah, blah, blah. I said, do you know what you did with it? He said, I threw it out the window. I said, do you remember where you were? Well, let me tell you what he did. I couldn't find the brick. The next day, when I walked in my office, that night, he had got all the staff together and said, we're going to find a Butler brick. There's got to be a Butler brick company. They found it and had it flown in, bought it a seat on American Airlines, flew the brick into Nashville, went out and picked it up. And when I walked in my office the next morning, Jeff, the Butler brick was laying on my desk. And just as I sat down and looked at it, I looked up. John walked in my office and said, Larry Butler, the other one didn't have your name on it.
That's great. That's a great story.
I still got the brick.
That's a great story. You, so far, are the only Nashville producer to win Producer of the Year.
Yeah.
Tell me that story.
Well, when the nominations came out for the Grammys, I was shocked that I was in the top 5. I mean, shocked. Because Producer of the Year is historically a pop producer award. Mm-hmm. And what, in essence, what it is the producer that for that year has been outstanding, that has done more work, great work than anybody else. And truly, being in the top 5, I was blown away. What a compliment. So I told my wife, I said, honey, we're not going to L.A. She said, why not? I said, I'm not going to win that award. Yeah. She said, you're nominated in the top 5. You're going to pay respect by being there. I said, you're right. So we went. We were sitting on the second row, and it was a pre-telecast award. Right. Over to my left was Pat Boone, B.J. Thomas, Chris Christopherson was sitting on the front row. Quincy was sitting right here. And Shadow Stevens came out for the pre-telecast award. This category, Producer of the Year, and the nominees are Larry Butler, Maurice White, Ted Templeton, Val Gray, Quincy Jones. And the winner is, and he went. When he did that, I sank down in my chair. I swear, Jeff. When I saw the look on his face, he literally did a double take on my name. And I know what he's thinking. What? He said, Larry Butler. Wow. And B.J. Thomas went straight up in the air, and Chris, they came over and grabbed me. I literally had sunk down, Jeff. I was in shock. But as I came up, I looked, and I saw Quincy walking out. And I'm thinking, hey, man, I'm more shocked than you are. But I've got it on my mantle.
That's absolutely awesome.
Then I won a Grammy for Song of the Year.
Which was?
Hey, won't you play another Somebody Done Somebody Wrong song?
Which is a great song. In about 1 minute, how'd you come up with that?
I didn't. A friend of mine named Chips Moman invited me to come by his house, and I went by, and we had a couple glasses of wine. We shot some pool. And anytime songwriters get together, they'll start reaching for guitars, you know. Let me play you a little song I wrote. Chip said, I've got this idea I've had for about 2.5 years. He sang the opening. It's lonely out tonight, the feeling just got right for a brand new love song. I said, hey, won't you play another Somebody Done Somebody? 20 minutes later, the song was finished.
Oh, wow.
Finished, 20 minutes. So then I said, I'm going to cut it with one of my artists. He said, let me do it with BJ. I'm producing him next week. Right. I said, I love BJ, I really do. But I've got an artist that's selling 100,000 albums and making some money. Because BJ was cold. I mean, he's cold. Yeah. He cut it. Told me to come by the studio, and I sat down. When he played me that cut, I looked at him and I said, "Ooh, that's scary." I said, "I'm telling you what it's going to be: a total, complete flop, or it's going to be gigantic." It was #1 country, #1 pop, #1 easy listening, and #1 adult contemporary.
So how many records did it sell altogether?
Oh, millions, and it's still selling. I get that mailbox money about every 90 days. I go, honey, I'll get the mail.
That's great. That's great.
And Dick Feller is the person who wrote Some Days Are Diamonds.
Oh, wow.
Took me a while, but I got it.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. We're running out of time. I've got give me in about 1 minute. What are you up to right now?
I'm doing something that I really am enjoying. I'm trying to help people who are trying to get into the music business, save a lot of time, save a lot of money, save a lot of heartaches. I've got a website, larrybutler.com. And if somebody really is trying and they're beating their head up against the wall, they can contact me through my website. Okay. And I will give them direction. I will give them advice. And I'm also writing again. And in fact, I'm going to Nashville next week. Got a couple of my songs that are being considered.
Good deal.
Gotten back into it, Jeff.
Good deal.
I thought I was retired.
Are you refreshed?
Oh, yeah. I'm as excited about music now as I've ever been in my life. And I'm really having a lot of fun with it.
That's great. Thank you so very much for spending some time with us. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure.
You are going to have to come back again.
Let's do it again.
We want to hear some more stories.
Sure, I got a bunch of them.
Larry Butler, Grammy award-winning producer and songwriter, visiting with us on this edition of Conversations. We thank you so very much for watching. By the way, you can check us out on the web at wsre.org/conversations, and we're also on Facebook. Just look for us, Conversations with Jeff Weeks on Facebook. We would certainly love to have your input and any ideas. Thank you so very much for watching. Take good care of yourself. I'm Jeff Weeks, and we'll see you next time on Conversations.